Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen. Today we will continue our course named Mining Russia. Welcome to the lecture 2. The topic of this lecture will be the main periods of the Russian history. Understanding country, understanding of culture is essentially understanding of history. And history is not only the changing of rulers, but it's a periodization of history of the country during all its span of time. And in history, there is the next classification of the Russian history. The beginning of Russia is Kievan Rus, or using old term, Old Russian state. Now its term doesn't seem so correct, but it has some foundation in the first Russian chronicles, especially the chief of the chronicles, primary tales, or in Russian, повесть временных лет. This period had began in 862 when three brothers, Rurik, Sineos, and Trubor, were invited by Finno-Ugric and Slavic tribes habitating in the shore of the Baltic Sea. And this early medieval state existed till 1097. After that, the feudal dissociation had happened. Kievan Rus crushed, and the several Russian lands or principates, because the leader of these each state were princes, and this prince in Russian knyaz, term which has a common Indo-European root with English king or German König or Scandinavian Konung. And these states existed until the Mongol invasion. In 1237, the attack of the Genghis Khan's grandson, Han Batu or Bati, had happened. And after this event, Russian states were under yoke of Tatar Mongols, or under Mongol yokes. It's a long period, around 200 years, when the ears of Kievan Rus were slaves of the Golden Horde. The kingdom emerged in the place of the western part of Genghis Khan Empire. But in the end of Mongol period, Moscow became the chief of Russian states. And after the crash of the Tatar-Mongol yoke, we can find the Muscovite Rus, or Russian state centralized in Moscow. And since 1480, Moscow gathered all other Russian states under its own control. In 47, first Russian Tsar, Ivan the Terrible, was enthroned and crowned. And this year was the first one in the period of the First Russian Realm, or First Russian Kingdom. But the terroristic and absolutely authoritarian policy of Ivan the Terrible and his aggressive policy in Baltic region were reasons for crash and fall of the first Russian regime. After the death of Ivan's son, Fyodor Ivanovich, time of troubles became in the Russia. Time of troubles was a period of civil wars and permanent destroying permanent disaster and disorder into Russian state. In fact, in this period, no government, no kind of rulings exist in the territory of Russia. And after the election of Mikhail Fyodorovich, the first Tsar from Romanov dynasty, the second Russian rule had begun, and this span of Russian history is known as the rise of Russia as a superpower. Of course, in the beginning of this period, there was long restoration of the time of troubles, but regardless of the permanent people's revolts and rebellions, first Romanov Tsars can made Russia strong state, and the victory in the so-called Northern War, between Sweden on the one hand and the Denmark, Russia, Poland, and Saxon in the other hand, was the first year of the Russian Empire. Russian Empire establishment was significant because Russia now became Europe significant superpower, and Peter the First or Peter the Great became first Russian emperor. His title in Russian sounded Imperator и Отец Отечества, or in English, Emperor and Father of Fatherland. Of course, Emperor and Father of Fatherland was inheritance of the Roman political terms. As you know, Cicero and Julius Caesars were proclaimed as Pater Patriae, or Father of Fatherland. 200 years long empire felt during the First World War. The Russian Revolution made point in the long history of Russian Empire. It was not only for Russia, but for across the world, significant events which divide early modern history and now actual history. The Russian Revolution was the beginning of many changes in the world during 20th century. For 5 years after the crash of the Romanovs monarchy, in fact, Russian state didn't exist, and in the place of last Russian Empire, there were many governments, many states, and many republics, like in the time of troubles. And in the December of 1922, the Soviet Union was established. The USSR, or Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, was example, according to Bolshevik logics, for future state of all proletarians, of all workers and peasants, and a light tower for all workers across the world. Of course, Bolsheviks believed in the world revolution, and they thought that Soviet Union will be the first step to organize a communist state in the whole world. And of course, Soviet period had several spans during its history, and it's absolutely different states with different logics, but all this time Communist Party headed Russian state. And after the crash of Soviet Union, new Russia had come in the world scene, and this new Russia proclaimed as democratic state, but of course after the 10 years of the beginning of this liberal and free period, Putin became president of the Russia, and Russian history and its trajectory radically changed. To understand last events which are happening in Russia, we should shortly and retrospectively observe each this period of Russian history. First of all, we should consider on Kievan Rus. This is on the slide the most the best map, the most successful map which I can find in internet, because here we can see the modern borders, because Kievan Rus is the mother not only for Russia, but for many states. Look, in the territory of Kievan Rus now exists Russian Federation, Ukraine, Moldova, partly Romania, Poland, all Belarus, partly Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Finland. And Kievan Rus was early medieval state or barbaric kingdom. Barbaric kingdom is not humiliation or insult or criticizing term. Barbaric kingdom means a state in which a leader, king or prince, as in a case of Kievan Rus, is first of all a tribal leader, and this tribal leader gather tributes from other tribes. Of course, economy of Kievan Rus was primitive. The chief goods for trade were honey, fur, and of course slaves. Varangians, Varegs, or as they know in English, Vikings, traveled through Kievan Rus, got local population as prisoners, and they sold them in the trade, in the slave trades, in the slave markets in Constantinople, the capital of Byzantium. And slave trading was the chief article of incomes for Kievan Rus economy. After the Congress of Princes in Lubech in 1097, feudal dissociation had begun. Kievan Rus had fallen, and in its territory several principates appeared. Principate is the kind of ruling when prince is the leader of state, and this feudal period is now also, as in Russian, удельный период. In Russian term, удел, in English, portion or part of heritage. And udel was the really feud or territory which was a legacy of prince from his ancestors. Of course, all princes were relatives and the parts of one family, and they were kin. And however, in the territory of the Russian states, wars and civil conflicts were permanent situation, and these facts made Russian principates weaker. After that, as consequence, nomad invasion became more often, and the chief invasion happened in 1237. It was invasion of Batu Khan or Han Bati. Mongol period was time when all Russian states enslaved by hands offspring of the Genghis Khan dynasty. And during all this period, Russian states paid tribute for hands based in Sarai. Sarai is the capital of Golden Horde, or in Russian Zolotaya Orda. It's the main ear of Genghis Khan Empire, which was patron of Russian medieval states during 200 years. In this slide, you can see picture by Russian artist Ivanov named Baskaki. Baskaki is a Turkish term for tribute gatherers. This source of hand took money or all kinds of richness from Russian villages and towns. Of course, this tribute gathering was regular and organized and systematic. That's why the most of wealth and richness of Russian state were taken by Mongols. This time was time of stopping and decreasing of economical, human, and political growth, but permanent resistance to Mongols was the chief reason of the crash of Mongol yoke. It happens in 1480 in the time of so-called the standing on Ugra river, when two troops by of Muscovite Prince Ivan III or Ivan the Great and Hordes Ahmad stood each against other, but Mongol Tatar troops defeat after 3 months of standing. And after that, we can say about the Muscovite Rus, when Moscow was the chief center of Russia. Of course, for this period, several independent from Moscow Russian states exist, but Ivan III, Ivan the Great, and his son Basil, or in Russian Vasily III, conquered all this territory, and after that, for Moscow was no alternative as the center of Russian state, and the grandson of Ivan III, Ivan IV, became first Russian Tsar. This ruler established first Russian realm or first Russian kingdom. Ivan the Terrible and crowned officially as Tsar. Tsar is a term came from Latin, from medieval Latin Caesar, or classical Latin Kaiser, Caesar, and this title was especially actual for Russia, as by its logic, the alone year of Roman Empire. Before birth of Ivan the Terrible, monk from Pskov city named Philofey made the theory named Moscow as Third Rome. According to this theory, First Rome, Imperial Rome, had fallen because of the relationship with Arian heresy. The Second Rome, Constantinople, the capital of Byzantium, disappeared because of the union with the Latin or Roman Catholic forces in the Florentine Church Council. And now Moscow is the true Rome, the Third Rome. And Philofey wrote in medieval Russian: Два Рима падоша, третий стоит, а четвертому не быти. Two Romes had already fallen, but Third Rome is standing, and Fourth Rome never will come. And the legend named the tale of the Princess of Vladimir justified Russian Tsars ruling, because there, according to this legend, they were the offspring of Roman emperors. According to this tale, first Roman Emperor Augustus had a brother named Bruce, and Bruce left Rome and went to the north. After several hundred years, his great son Rurik became a father of Russian dynasty of Rurikids. According to this logic, Russian Tsars are relatives to Roman emperors. But this imperial idea was needed because of the permanent expansion of the First Russian realm. The most of Khanates, the years of the Golden Horde, were conquered by Ivan the Terrible. Kazan Khanate, Astrakhan Khanate, Nogai Horde, etc. And the end of the Ivan the Terrible ruling, the Cossack leader Yermak started the invasion in Siberia. But terror policy of Ivan the Terrible and the beginning of serfdom were the chief reason that First Russian realm declined and fallen. And after this time, the time of troubles has begun. In this picture, you can see in the on the left the portrait of the in Russian Dmitry, in English pseudo Dmitry or false Dmitry, and in the second picture on the right you can see the military camp of the pseudo Dmitry II. The phenomenon of the self-proclaimed czars, or in Russian samozvanцы, was the essence of the time of troubles. Several aventurists named their own as the Ivan the Terrible son Dmitry, and these pseudo princes were leaders of the pseudo kingdom which existed around Moscow. And in fact, the pseudo Dmitry I enthroned in the Russian throne during 1 year. This time of troubles was a result of discreditation of royal power during Ivan the Terrible, and the end of this period was election of the first Romanov dynasty Tsar, which has named Mikhail Fedorovich. This young prince established absolutely new kind of realm in Russian history. The second Russian realm existed till the Russian Empire proclamation. These pictures are good illustration for the situation in the second Russian realm. Here you can see so-called Boyarskaya Duma, or council of the old aristocracy, existed around the Tsar. Of course, all educated person in the West knows about autocracy or kinds of tyranny and despotism in Russia. But in the 17th century, the monarchy in Russia was limited. Of course, not constitutional like in England, but limited by so-called Zemsky Sabor, or all land council, or all land congress. And also the foundation of the Tsar power limitation was Boyarskaya Duma, old aristocracy or boyars council around Tsar. And boyars were old aristocracy who had their own genealogy since Rurik or first Muscovite princes. But in Russia, there were many nobles, or in Russian dvaryane, courtmen. It's a military which served for Tsar because of land. In England, there were manors, or land which was a inheritance from ancestors. But in Russia, pomestье, or the land holding, were the kind of payings for military service. And between nobles, courtmen, dvaryane, and old aristocracy, boyare, were many contradiction and discussion and arguments during all 17th century. And in this picture you can see Russian national hero Stepan Razin, the leader of one of the many rebellions which had happened in Russia during 17th century. In Russian history, 17th century has as a name a rebellious age. And in this picture, you can see a discussion between Tsarevna, or Princess Sofia, and leader of old believers, Nikita Pustasvят, or in English, Nikita Empty Saint. Father of Sofia, Tsar Alexei Mikhailovich, made religious reform. This reformation of church made dissociation into Russian church. There were two parties, Nikonians, by name of the Patriarch Nikon, who was father of this reforming, and old believers, or in Russian Staroobryadцы, or in Russian Raskolniki, which we can translate as dissidents or dissociators. Russian official powers began the persecution of old believers as enemies, not only church but state and government too. And till the fall of Russian Empire, old believers were victims of permanent severe religious oppression. Russian Empire. Peter the First, or Peter the Great, the first Russian emperor, was proclaimed in the autumn of 1721 after the victory in the Northern War, when Russia conquered the shore of Baltic Sea and became a marine superpower with a strong navy in the Baltic Sea. The chief son, the chief child of Peter, St. Petersburg, became the typical essential European city, more European than other European ones. And this empire exists till the Russian Revolution. But of course, during all this empire, there were many different periods, and Russian Empire with Peter the Great has absolute difference with Empire of Nicholas II, the last Russian emperor. Russian Revolution. There are many reasons why this event had happened. Once we will have a special lecture about the Russian Revolution, but now we will discuss the chief reasons why this radical political change happened. First of all, is the autocracy. The old-fashioned political regime existed in 20th century. It was absolutely inadequate to the challenges of this time. Second is the bad condition in which lived the most of Russian population, the peasants. Third is the bad state of the workers living in the cities. Fourth is the First World War, which destroyed all Russian economy and discredited royal family. And the chief force which discredited and made dishonored to all royal Romanov family was Rasputinщина, or ruling of Rasputin, the aventurist, who was influential to the historic empress Alexander Fedorovna, wife of the Nicholas II. All these reasons were putting together, and in the February of 1917, Russian Empire ended. The revolt in the capital of Russian Empire in Petrograd was the chief event which opened the series of tragic and great changes in Russian and world society. After February Revolution in the fall of 1917, October Revolution or October Revolt had happened. In this time, Bolsheviks or communists got power in Petrograd. After this event, for 3 years, Russia was in flame of the civil war. Many foreigners which visited Russia in this dark span of its history describe absolutely unconditional, wild, cruel situation which was in Russia. In fact, Russia no longer existed. In the territory of last Russian Empire, there were several governments, absolutely different in their political orientation. But Bolshevik won in old and bloody civil war, and after that, they established the Soviet Union. Soviet period is the period around 70 years since Bolshevik Revolution till the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. But in fact, it's different, absolutely different countries, like a parallel universe. Of course, many Westerners, Americans, Europeans think that also Soviet period was absolutely the same. Communist rules, there was totalitarianism, permanent and absolute control of KGB, etc., etc., etc. But in fact, Communist Party changed during this period more than parties in the Great Britain and United States. In the first picture, you can see a private store in Moscow in 1920s. There is a name manufacturer, or the product of the industry. And 1920 was time of the so-called new economic policy, or NEP, both in Russian and English. NEP was a time when Bolsheviks play in a free market. It's paradoxically sounds for many of us, but Bolsheviks support free market. Of course, it was more limited than in America one, but free market existed. And NEP Russia, or New Economical Policy Russia, was a more authoritarian state than totalitarian. And there were more liberties and freedoms than in Tsarist period. But in 1929, Stalin commenced industrialization, or making Russia industrial country, industrial society. But for this process, money was needed, and where Stalin and Communist Party could seek money for buying the industrial tools in the West. Of course, from Russian peasantry, the most of the population. This process initialized the other process of collectivization. Collectivization was absolutely destroyed of private property in the village. Many peasants, millions of peasants, were lost. Their houses, their holdings, and were exiled in Siberia or in other cold part of Russia. And collectivization what was a real genocide of Russian people. But Stalinism ended in the March of 1953 by death of Stalin. After death of Stalin, the leaders of Communist Party, Nikita Khrushchev, Lazar Kaganovich, Georgy Malenkov, Nikolai Bulganin, and other said, never again, never one person leading one person regime again. In 1957, in the 20th Congress of the Communist Party, debunking of Stalin's cult happened. After that period of so-called warming or thaw has started in Soviet Russia. In this picture, you can see dancing young men and women, absolutely in American style, because the warming was time of liberalization and influence of the Western culture into Soviet society. Many Stalin's crimes came out from top secret information, and people knew about Gulag, the system of concentration camp, about the victims of collectivization. But in 1964, Nikita Khrushchev was overthrown by coup d'etat organized by his comrade, first of all, Leonid Brezhnev. And these events was the first year of next period of Soviet history, named as in Russian zastoy, or in English stagnation. Stagnation was time without economical growth, but with economical stability. Several historians named this span of Soviet history as golden fall or golden age of the USSR. Why? Because the most of population remember about the great terror of Stalinism. But in this period, there was no massive shooting down, no massive repression. But many people, the most of people, remembered about the famine in the Stalin's time, about malnutrition in time of the Second World War and earlier. But in the Brezhnev period, all people needs in Soviet logic were satisfied, and of this period is the key to understand logic of Putin, because Putin's early years, childhood, and early adultery were happening for Brezhnev rulings, and this time without change. People say, okay, you, Comrade Brezhnev, can rule over us, but without oppression, without political radical and strong political oppression on us. From our side, we will be loyal. And this was time of the absolute and mammoth level of corruption. Corruption existed in all part of Soviet Party, Communist Party, and bureaucratic apparatus. All officials, all party members were absolutely corrupt. And this time was a real paradise for Communist Party members, because it was not cannibal time as Stalin's period. You can use many Western stuff. You can hear Western music, but of course KGB persecute systematic enemies of Soviet regime named dissidents. But the most of population were not under repression. But this period ended by absolute crash of economy. In April 1985, a new period of Russian history begins. It's perestroika, or a building reshaping, in literal English translation. Perestroika was the time of radical political change. Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the Communist Party leader, and who made his career from low level of Communist Party organization to the Central Committee, want to reform Soviet plan centralized economy. But this situation was absolutely non-repairable, because fixing of destroying regime was impossible. It was like some work of physician or doctor over the cadaver, but liberal steps by Mikhail Gorbachev open the Pandora box. National movements, separatism, banditism. But all of these phenomena were a result of previous Soviet history. Many Russian people, including educated people, including ruler and government member, like to accuse Gorbachev to fall of the Soviet Union, to in making of all social disaster which happens after the crash of Soviet Union. But in fact, he also opened the disaster box, which already existed in Soviet society. 1991 was time of the Belovedsky treaties, in which communist Russia failed, and in the territory of last Soviet Union, 15 new independent states emerged. 19th in Russia is known as Likhie 90, or troubles 19th. But in fact, regardless of some economical problems which were in other post-communistic countries, Russia was absolutely free, absolute freedom of press, freedom of speech, and the first of all alternative election. In the left photo, you can see dancing first Russian president Boris Yeltsin. For many Russian people, Boris Yeltsin is an alcoholic and permanent drunk old man with dementia. But in fact, Boris Yeltsin was no essential communist. He became Communist Party member only in when he was 30, and moreover, he was from a family which was victims of Stalin's political repression. He remembered a time of collectivization which happens in his childhood, and of course he, in the depth of his soul, hate communist regime. And this man was typical average Russian man from the middle Russia, who was born in the near Ural Mountains. And Yeltsin was incarnation, embodiment of the deep wills and ideas of most of Russian people. The great expectations time, great hopes time of 1990s crashed over the reefs of the Chechen war, over economical crisis and default of 1998. Now, this time was the period of so-called ministerskaya checharda, or ministers jumping, like in the last years of Russian Empire, when governments leaders change every several months. The last government leader's prime minister was Vladimir Putin. And this man was born in the St. Petersburg, in Leningrad, in the poor average Soviet family. But in his youth, he wanted to be a spy. And after the degree in the law school in the Leningrad University, he became KGB agent. And during his service in this Soviet secret police, he got rank in Russian podpolkovnik, or literally in English under-colonel. Of course, in America and Great Britain, this rank doesn't exist, but it's a rank between major and colonel. And in the 1990s, he was bandit and member of mafiosi organization in St. Petersburg. And in 1996, he became of the Russian secret police named Federal Service of Security, Federal Service of Security, or in Russian FSB. In 1999, he became prime minister, and in the year eve of 2000 of the millennium, he became executive president. Executive president means the provisional temporal president till new election, because of the earlier exit previous president from his office. And this president organized new step of Russian history. It is very tragic, bloody, but interesting, because Russia want to be Russian Empire and Soviet Union in one phase, and moreover, idea of the Putin is no more revolution. The counter-revolutionary essence is the fundamental concept. All kinds of rebellions and revolution in previous Russian history is bad, but all leaders who protect the stability and order are good. In the one political camp, we can meet Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Joseph Stalin, etc. It's absolutely different leaders, but unfortunately, the idea of restoration of empire and return to great past was really foundation of actual Putin aggressive policy. Okay, dear ladies and gentlemen, I hope my lecture is so interesting for you. Please subscribe my channel, comment my video, and soon here will be new lectures. Thanks a lot for attention. Thanks for joining us, and see you later.